A vampire king meets his ex and a baby in an elevator. She tries to escape, but the doors jam. Rain-slicked streets reflected the neon glow of the city, turning puddles into mirrors that shimmered like molten silver. In the heart of this sleepless metropolis, a skyscraper loomed taller than the rest, its glass walls reflecting the stormy night sky. Inside, the elevator doors slid open, and Arian, the vampire king, stepped in. Every movement he made was precise, controlled, and commanding, even in the quiet hum of the building. He was a man, or rather, a being, whose mere presence drew attention, even when no one else was around. His black coat brushed the floor lightly, a shadow within shadows, and his eyes, deep and dark as midnight, scanned the empty car. The hum of the elevator seemed almost respectful in his presence, as if the metal itself knew to stay silent. Tonight, he was not here for pleasure. The Midnight Council awaited him at the top floor, an assembly of ancient beings who measured power as others measured wealth. The elevator descended smoothly, a quiet mechanical sigh beneath his feet. But then at the ground floor, the doors opened again and someone rushed in, a woman. She carried a small bundle, wrapped tightly, her hands trembling as if afraid someone, or something, might snatch it away. Leora. Her name hit him like a sharp, cold wind. She had not changed much in appearance. Her hair still fell in dark waves around her face, and her eyes, wide and wary, flicked around the elevator as if she expected danger from every corner. But the years had added weight to her shoulders, the kind that comes from secrets and fear, from nights spent hiding and running. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Time seemed to fold in the small, confined space. The baby in her arms let out a soft, curious coo, and the sound seemed to pull at something deep inside Arian. His gaze, once indifferent and cold, softened ever so slightly. "Arian," Leora's voice was low, almost a whisper. She tried to move past him, pressing the button for the elevator to ascend, but he shifted subtly, blocking her path. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but enough that she understood she could not leave. The air in the elevator grew thick, charged with unspoken tension. Memories surfaced unbidden. Moonlit nights when their hands had brushed, the whispered promises that had been broken, the betrayal that had forced her to flee centuries ago. Arian's expression remained unreadable, but his body tensed, muscles coiled beneath the dark coat. "Leora," he said, his voice calm but layered with weight, "you shouldn't be here." "I have my reasons," she replied, clutching the baby closer. "Please, I don't want trouble." Arian's eyes flicked to the small child, nestled safely in her arms. Something about the baby, the shape of the nose, the delicate curve of the lips, stirred a strange, impossible recognition. His chest tightened, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a moment of hesitation. The elevator moved, slowly ascending through the stormy night, but then it shuddered violently and stopped. The lights flickered, leaving them in half-shadow. A soft mechanical groan echoed around them, but Arian's sharp eyes did not move from Leora and the child. "This is strange," he said, tilting his head slightly. Normally he would have understood every machine, every lock, every seal, yet the elevator refused to obey. Leora swallowed, a lump forming in her throat. "I think we're stuck." Arian's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly, into a shadow of a smile. "Perhaps the elevator knows we need it this time." Fear flickered across her features. She tightened her hold on the child. "I don't think it's a joke." She stopped herself, realizing it was useless to argue. He was not a man to be argued with, not anymore. "Tell me," Arian said, voice calm yet insistent. "Why are you carrying him? Why here? Why now?" Leora looked away, suddenly aware of the oppressive closeness of the space. The walls felt like they were pressing inward, and she realized the baby was reacting to him. The small fingers reached out almost instinctively, grasping for his shadowed presence. A soft gasp escaped her. How did the child know? I can't explain everything," she said finally. "Not yet, please, you don't understand." Arian's eyes narrowed, sensing the half-truths and the fear. He could feel her heartbeat, quick and panicked, mingling with the rhythm of the baby's. His own senses, honed over centuries, sharpened. This child carried something extraordinary, something that pulsed like a hidden flame. Extraordinary, Leora echoed, fear sharpening her voice. He's just a child. Please, Arian, please don't. Her words cut off as a distant growl reverberated through the elevator shaft. It was low, unnatural, and sent a shiver down both their spines. The baby stirred, as if aware of the presence outside, and Leora instinctively brought him closer, wrapping him protectively. Arian stiffened. His eyes, black as the midnight sky, glimmered faintly with the reflection of the emergency lights. "It knows," he said softly, almost to himself. Then louder, "We are not alone." Leora's pulse hammered in her ears. What is it?" she whispered. "Danger," Arian replied, his voice a velvet blade. "Something drawn to him, something unnatural." He gestured slightly, and the elevator seemed to respond. The metal walls hummed faintly, almost acknowledging his presence. "And yet," he continued, his gaze flicking to her, "we will not be harmed, not if I am here." She wanted to argue, to flee, to deny the lingering feelings that threatened to rise inside her. But she was frozen, captivated by the intensity of his gaze, the authority of his presence, the quiet storm that surrounded him. Even in the confined space of the elevator, he dominated everything, her fear, her thoughts, her heartbeat. For a few moments, they simply stood there. The rain outside pattered against the glass walls of the building, a soft symphony of the night, and the baby cooed again, as if sensing a fragile moment of calm amidst the tension. Leora began, hesitating. I can't tell you everything yet. Not here." "Perhaps not," Arian said, the hint of a smile playing on his lips, "but some things cannot stay hidden. Some truths will reveal themselves whether you want them to or not." He stepped closer and the air shifted. The elevator felt smaller now, closer, intimate, even dangerous. Leora's heart raced. She remembered the nights when he had held her in his arms, whispered promises that seemed eternal, and the betrayal that had driven her away. Yet now, standing before him again, she realized that the past had not entirely disappeared. It lingered like a shadow refusing to leave the light. The growl outside returned, louder, closer. Leora's grip on the baby tightened, instinctively shielding him. Arian's eyes darkened and he moved, standing protectively between her and the doors. "Do not fear," he said quietly, though his tone carried undeniable authority. "Whatever comes, I will not allow it to touch either of you." Leora glanced up at him, a mix of disbelief and dawning trust in her gaze. The fear that had defined her for centuries began to mix with something else: recognition, longing, and the faint, stubborn hope that perhaps this encounter was not entirely a curse. The elevator shuddered again, a low groan echoing as if protesting their presence. Then suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The hum of the elevator became a whisper, and all that remained was the soft cooing of the child, the distant sound of rain, and the heartbeat of two people whose past had collided violently in a small, suspended space. Arian's hand brushed lightly against the wall, sensing the magical undercurrent in the elevator. "We are not merely trapped by metal," he murmured. "This is something else, something alive." Leora's eyes widened. "Alive?" He nodded, his gaze flickering to her, sharp and piercing. "Yes, and it knows the child, it knows what he is." Fear, awe, and a strange sense of anticipation welled in Leora. The tiny baby in her arms stretched his fingers toward Arian once more, innocent, unaware, yet somehow a link between past and future. The elevator remained still. Outside, the city's neon lights pulsed through the rain, distant and cold. Inside, time seemed to have paused. 2 centuries of history, betrayal, love, and loss hung between them in the small, vibrating space. Finally, Arian spoke, his voice low and almost tender. "You cannot hide him forever, and perhaps you should not try." Leora looked down at the child, then back at him, a tear escaping despite her efforts. "I only wanted to protect him," she whispered. "And you have," Arian said, his tone softer now, almost reverent. "But protection sometimes comes from facing the storm, not hiding from it." The elevator shuddered once more, small vibrations running through the metal floor. Outside, faint sounds of movement echoed. Leora held her breath. Arian's presence radiated power, silent and unyielding, and for the first time in centuries, she felt that she might not be entirely alone in this world. Then, without warning, the elevator jolted violently. A metallic screech echoed through the shaft, and the lights flickered violently before stabilizing again. Leora instinctively pressed the child closer, and Arian's shadow fell over them both like a shield. "We are here together now," he said softly, almost a promise. "Whatever comes, we will face it." The baby cooed again, tiny hands reaching for him, unafraid. Leora's breath caught in her throat. In the small, suspended space of the elevator, past and present collided, fear and trust intertwined, and a story that had begun centuries ago stirred once more. The elevator trembled, metal groaning like a living thing. Outside, something waited, something aware. And within the shadows of the small, confined space, the vampire king and the woman he had once loved, along with the child that linked them, faced a moment that would change their lives forever. The elevator remained suspended in the shaft, silent except for the soft hum of its ancient machinery. Rain streaked the glass walls of the skyscraper above, turning the city into a blur of neon light and shadow. Inside, Arian and Leora stood tensely, the child nestled safely in her arms. Time seemed suspended, each second heavy with the weight of their past and with the unspoken truths they both carried. Arian's eyes never left them. The baby stirred, small fingers reaching for him again, almost instinctively. He felt a tug at his chest, a warmth that was foreign yet familiar. Centuries of solitude, power, and control had taught him caution, but now, faced with the child, something inside him loosened, softening in ways he had long denied. "You've kept him hidden well," Arian said, his voice low, careful, as if the words themselves might shatter fragile glass. Leora stiffened. "I didn't hide him to protect myself," she said quickly, her gaze flicking nervously to the elevator doors. "I hid him to protect him. That's all that matters." Arian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could sense her fear, the careful control she exerted over her own heart, but he also felt the truth beneath it. The baby was important, extraordinary, and dangerous. He could sense the faint echo of something powerful in the child's aura, a pulse of magic or blood that whispered of a lineage long thought lost. The elevator shuddered slightly, a reminder that they were still trapped, still suspended between floors. Leora's grip on the baby tightened. "Do you have to be so calm?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "We're stuck. There's something out there, something unnatural." Arian's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Calm is a tool," he said softly. "Fear does not serve us, but awareness does." The baby cooed again, tilting his head curiously toward Arian. Leora felt a chill run down her spine. How could such a small, innocent creature sense danger so clearly? How could it react to Arian as if recognizing him, calling him silently? "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered, almost to herself. "I do," Arian replied, his voice steady, yet his eyes glimmered with intensity. "And so does it. Whatever approaches, it is drawn to him." "Not to you, not to me. It is drawn to him." Leora's heart raced. "Why?" Arian stepped closer, the soft glow of the emergency lights reflecting off his sharp features. "Because he carries something that should not exist in this world, yet does. Something ancient, powerful, and fragile. Something that will draw both allies and enemies alike." The words hung in the air, heavy and potent. Leora instinctively wrapped her arms around the child, holding him closer to her chest. She felt both fear and awe, a mix that twisted her stomach and made her pulse race. Arian's gaze softened briefly, just enough for Leora to catch a glimpse of the man he had once been, before centuries of power had hardened him. "Tell me," he said quietly, "why have you brought him here?" Leora hesitated, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had spent so long running, hiding the child, avoiding Arian, fearing both his wrath and the curse that had once bound them. "I didn't know where else to go. He's special. I thought you would understand, but Arian's eyes darkened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "You ran from me," he said, each word deliberate. "You left without a word, and now you expect me to protect what you've hidden for centuries." "I left to save him," Leora snapped, her voice rising slightly despite herself. "I couldn't risk him being harmed because of us, because of the world you rule. Do you understand? I only wanted to keep him safe." Arian's jaw tightened. His eyes, black as the midnight sky, softened only slightly as he studied the child. The small fingers reached toward him again, unafraid, innocent, and impossibly trusting. The sight struck him like a dagger. He had never imagined a future where he could be this close to something so pure, so vulnerable. "You're telling me this child is safe?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper, though the authority behind it was undeniable. Leora nodded, her eyes wary. "For now, but the world is not kind, Arian. There are those who would take him, use him, or destroy him. That's why I'm here. That's why I had no choice but to come back." Arian's lips pressed into a thin line. He reached out, fingers hovering just above the baby without touching. "I feel it," he murmured. "The power within him, it is mine. It is yours, and it is dangerous. You've carried this burden alone, but you needn't any more." The words lingered in the elevator like smoke. Leora's chest tightened, emotions swirling, fear, hope, longing, and the faint, stubborn flicker of trust she had once placed in him. For centuries she had hidden, avoided, and feared. And yet here he was, centuries older, stronger, more commanding than ever, and yet he still spoke as if the past could be mended. The elevator shuddered again, a violent, metallic groan that reverberated through the small space. Leora instinctively hugged the baby tighter. Arian's eyes narrowed, sensing the presence outside. "Do you hear it?" Leora whispered, voice trembling. Arian nodded. "It's coming closer, it senses him. It knows what he is, and it desires it." A chill ran through Leora's veins. The growl, low and unnatural, echoed faintly through the shaft. It was not a sound of the city, not of nature, not of any living creature she had known. It was something else entirely, something that had been waiting, lurking in shadow, patient and calculating. "What is it?" she asked, voice barely audible. Arian's expression darkened. "Something drawn to power," he said, tone sharp. "Something ancient, something that should not exist outside the darkness, and it will not leave until it has what it wants." The baby stirred again, cooing softly, unaware of the danger. Leora's heart ached, the desire to protect him clashing with fear of what was coming. "How do we stop it?" Arian's eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light. "We don't. We survive, and we protect him. That is enough." He stepped closer to the elevator wall, fingers brushing lightly against the metal. The air shifted, subtle vibrations running through the elevator. Shadows seemed to gather, curling toward him as if obeying some silent command. Leora watched in awe, realizing that this was no ordinary man before her. This was a king, a predator, a protector, and yet beneath it all, someone capable of love, loss, and sorrow. Minutes stretched like hours. The growl outside grew louder, more insistent, and yet within the elevator a strange calm settled. Arian's presence was a shield, a force that even the darkness outside seemed hesitant to breach. Leora felt her fear mix with something else, something she hadn't felt in centuries, hope. I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "After all these years," Arian's gaze softened. "Trust is earned," he said quietly. "And sometimes it is forced by circumstance. Right now, we have no choice but to trust each other. That is enough." Leora nodded slowly, feeling the truth in his words. The baby stirred again, reaching for Arian instinctively. A shiver ran down her spine. It was as if the child knew on some level that this man, the one she had once loved, once feared, was connected to him in ways she could not yet comprehend. A sudden vibration ran through the elevator floor, stronger than before. The growl outside became a guttural roar, echoing through the shaft like the sound of an ancient beast. The elevator groaned in response, metal twisting under forces unseen. Leora's heart raced. The child cried out softly, startled. Arian's eyes darkened, pupils narrowing. He stepped closer, placing himself protectively between the baby and the doors. "It will not touch him," he said, voice low and firm. "Not while I stand here." Leora looked up at him, fear mingling with awe. He was terrifying, beautiful, and impossible all at once. And she realized with a sinking feeling that she was powerless to leave him. Not here. Not now. The elevator shuddered violently and the lights flickered. The shadows on the walls seemed to grow, stretching toward them like fingers. The presence outside was undeniable now, waiting, watching, patient, and relentless. Arian's lips pressed into a thin line. "Prepare yourself," he said quietly. "Whatever is out there knows him, and it will not wait much longer." Leora hugged the baby tightly, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She had feared this reunion, feared the power he carried, feared what centuries of separation might mean. But now, faced with the danger outside and the man she had once loved standing before her, she realized that fear alone would not save them. Only courage and trust might. The growl outside rose again, closer, louder almost, impatient. Leora opened her eyes, looking at Arian. His expression was unreadable, but the faint flicker of concern in his gaze betrayed the truth. They were about to face something that would test them both, in ways they could not yet imagine. The elevator trembled again, metal groaning like a living thing under pressure. Shadows stretched along the walls, twisting unnaturally, and the faint emergency lights flickered with an eerie rhythm. Leora hugged the baby tightly, rocking him gently to calm his soft cries. The sound of his cooing was both a comfort and a reminder of why she had fled for so long. Arian stood before them, motionless except for the faint flicker of his eyes, which now glimmered with a strange, almost predatory light. He was calm, precise, and unyielding, yet beneath that exterior the tension was palpable. The growl outside had grown louder, closer, more insistent, and even Arian seemed wary of it. "This is no ordinary creature," he said quietly, more to himself than to Leora. "It has sensed something it should not, and it will not stop until it finds it." Leora swallowed hard. It wants him, doesn't it?" Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. "The baby. It's drawn to him, but why?" Arian's gaze softened slightly, shifting to the child in her arms. "Because he carries power, something ancient, something tied to my bloodline and yours." Leora's breath caught. "Power? What do you mean?" Arian moved closer, careful not to frighten the child. "This child is not ordinary. He is part of the curse I once carried, and part of the hope I thought was lost. He carries my blood, and your protection has kept him safe all these years." Leora's hands tightened around the baby. She had always known the child was special, but hearing Arian speak so openly about it sent a shiver down her spine. "You mean he's yours?" Arian's eyes flickered with a mix of anger, awe, and disbelief. "Yes," he said quietly, "and that truth changes everything." Leora's heart raced. The revelation was overwhelming, yet it explained so much. The instinct the child had shown toward Arian, the sense of recognition she had always felt, it all made sense now. But the knowledge brought with it a fresh wave of fear. "And what does that mean for us? For him?" Arian's gaze softened, though the weight of centuries of pain and power lingered in his eyes. "It means we must protect him," he said firmly. "Together, there is no other way." A violent shudder ran through the elevator, making the small space feel impossibly tight. Leora instinctively held the child closer, feeling the warmth of his body against her chest. The growl outside had changed. It was no longer distant. Now it was close enough that she could hear the scraping of claws against metal, the hiss of breath that was not quite human. Arian's expression darkened. "It is here." Leora's pulse quickened. What do we do?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, sensing the presence outside. The shadows seemed to bend toward him as if acknowledging his authority. When he opened his eyes, they glimmered with a strange, fierce light. "We face it. There is no other choice." The child stirred again, reaching out instinctively toward Arian. Leora felt a strange chill run down her spine. The bond between the two was undeniable, almost supernatural in its intensity. Whatever lay outside the elevator knew it too. Suddenly, the elevator shook violently, throwing Leora off balance. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching the baby protectively. Arian moved like a shadow, placing himself between them and the doors. The shadows seemed to cling to him, curling around his form, as if ready to fight on his command. The growl became a roar, loud and unrelenting. Leora's eyes widened as she glimpsed a shape through the small gap between the doors, dark, twisted, almost unreal. It was massive, more creature than beast, and it shimmered with an unnatural aura. Its gaze, though unseen, seemed to pierce the elevator walls, locking onto the child in her arms. Arian's jaw tightened. "It wants him." "But it will not have him," he said quietly, almost as a promise. Leora nodded, feeling both fear and awe. She had spent centuries running, hiding the child from the world. Yet now, faced with Arian and the supernatural force outside, she realized that fleeing was no longer an option. Survival depended on trust, cooperation, and perhaps forgiveness. Arian moved closer, placing a hand gently on the wall of the elevator. The shadows around him shifted, forming almost tangible shapes that pressed against the darkness outside. Leora watched in awe as he whispered something under his breath, and the elevator seemed to respond, humming with an energy that was neither mechanical nor natural. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly, his eyes locked on hers. "This child is more than just yours or mine. He is the bridge between past and future, between curses and hope, and he cannot be protected alone." Leora's breath caught in her throat. The truth of his words, combined with the fear that had haunted her for centuries, made her feel both vulnerable and resolute. I understand," she whispered, "but I still don't know if I can trust you completely." Arian's gaze softened. "Trust is earned, yes," he said quietly, "but sometimes it must be given when there is no other choice. Right now, we must trust each other, or we will lose everything." The creature outside let out another roar, louder this time, and the elevator shook violently again. Leora's hands trembled as she held the child, feeling the tiny body stiffen against her chest. Arian stepped forward, his presence commanding the shadows, forming a protective barrier between them and the darkness outside. "You will not touch him," Arian said, voice low and steady, yet filled with authority. "Not while I stand here." Leora's fear mingled with awe. The man before her was terrifying and magnificent, more powerful than she had ever imagined. And yet, beneath that power, she sensed something else, a hint of the man she had once loved, a man capable of tenderness, sorrow, and hope. The growl outside changed again, almost like a hiss of frustration. The creature recoiled slightly, sensing the strength radiating from Arian. But it did not retreat entirely. It was patient, cunning, and relentless, waiting for an opening, waiting for a mistake. Leora looked at Arian, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and understanding. What is it?" she whispered. Arian's eyes glimmered faintly. "It is a hunter," he said quietly, "drawn to power, to blood, to the extraordinary, and it has never failed in its pursuit." Leora's heart pounded. The weight of the situation, the revelation about the child, and the looming danger outside pressed down on her like a heavy stone. Yet, at the same time, she felt a strange sense of calm. Perhaps it was the presence of Arian, his power, and the undeniable bond forming between them. Perhaps it was the realization that they were facing the storm together, finally. "Then we fight," she said softly, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "We protect him." Together, Arian's lips curved into a faint smile, barely perceptible in the dim light. "Good," he said quietly, "because whatever comes, I will not fail him, or you." The elevator shuddered again, violently this time, and Leora instinctively pressed herself and the child against the wall. The shadows seemed to writhe, responding to Arian's presence, forming almost tangible shapes that pressed against the darkness outside. For a moment the world outside the elevator ceased to exist. There was only them, the child, Leora, and Arian, and the bond that connected them. Fear, love, and hope intertwined, creating a fragile yet undeniable strength. The growl outside became a roar once more, and the elevator trembled violently. Leora's breath came in short, rapid gasps, and the child stirred again, sensing the tension. Arian's eyes glimmered with determination, and he whispered something under his breath. The shadows responded, forming a protective barrier that shimmered faintly, almost like a curtain of darkness and light. "Stay close," he said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. "No matter what happens, stay close. Do not let fear guide you. Only trust, only courage." Leora nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had spent centuries running, hiding, and fearing the unknown. But now, with Arian by her side, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was standing firm in the face of it. The creature outside made a final, low hiss, its presence undeniable, its intent clear. It would not wait. It would not relent. It would strike, and the elevator trembled as if sensing the coming clash. Arian moved closer, positioning himself protectively in front of them. His shadow stretched along the walls, intertwining with the darkness, forming a shield that was both physical and supernatural. Leora felt a sense of awe and helplessness, mixed with hope. "Whatever comes," Arian said, his voice steady, low, and commanding, "we face it together. And we will endure." The elevator shook violently once more, and the shadows seemed to shift in anticipation. Leora held the child tightly, feeling the warmth and the fragile life in her arms. She glanced at Arian, and in his eyes, she saw something she had not seen for centuries: resolve, care, and the faintest glimmer of love. The elevator groaned, metal twisting under the pressure of forces neither mechanical nor human. Outside, the growl of the creature had grown into a full-throated roar, a sound that vibrated through the shaft and pressed against the walls like a living weight. The emergency lights flickered, bathing the small space in alternating shadows and pale gold, making the elevator feel both fragile and eternal at once. Arian stood at the forefront, a figure carved from shadow and steel. His eyes glimmered with the faint luminescence of his vampire essence, pupils narrowing as he assessed the threat beyond the doors. Every muscle in his body was tense, ready, yet controlled. The child in Leora's arms stirred, sensing the rising power in the air, and Leora instinctively tightened her hold on him. "We cannot hide," Arian said softly, almost to himself. "This ends here." Leora looked at him, fear and awe swirling in her chest. "End here? But how?" "We're trapped. There's no escape." He glanced at her, his expression softening for a brief moment. "Sometimes true strength comes not from escape, but from standing firm, from facing what terrifies you most." The shadows along the walls shifted as if in response to his will. The air thickened, carrying the scent of storm and stone. Leora could feel the faint pulse of energy radiating from him, power tempered by centuries of discipline, but also tinged with something more. A deep, unspoken longing that even the creature outside could not pierce. The growl outside became a hiss, almost impatient, and then, with terrifying speed, the shadowed figure pressed against the doors. Its massive claws scraped the metal, sending a shiver through the elevator floor. Leora clutched the child tightly, whispering soothing words, though her own voice trembled. "Stay calm," Arian murmured, more to her than to the creature. It senses fear. Fear gives it strength. We cannot give it strength. The creature roared again, a sound that seemed to shake the very air, and the elevator responded as if alive. Shadows stretched outward from Arian's figure, curling around him like black flames, forming a protective barrier between them and the looming predator. Leora watched, breath caught in her throat. For centuries she had known him as distant, cruel, commanding, but here, standing protectively before her and the child, he seemed almost human, almost tender. The child's small hand reached toward him and he bent down slightly, allowing the tiny fingers to brush against his dark coat. The creature outside recoiled slightly, hissing in frustration. "You see," Arian said quietly, his eyes never leaving the doors. "Even it senses what is sacred." Leora nodded, though her pulse raced. "Sacred, the bond," he replied, "between us, between him and me. It cannot harm what is protected by love and will." The creature struck again, claws raking against the barrier of shadows Arian had raised. Sparks of dark energy flared, filling the small elevator with an otherworldly glow. Leora clutched the child closer, feeling warmth and life pulsing through her arms. She realized in that moment that the child's presence was more than a test. It was hope, a bridge between fear and courage. Arian's eyes darkened, pupils glowing faintly as he whispered under his breath. The shadows rippled, forming tendrils of dark energy that lashed out at the creature outside. The roar met resistance, echoing back, frustrated and unrelenting. Leora watched in awe as the Vampire King bent reality subtly to his will, turning the elevator into a cocoon of protection. "You are stronger than you realize," Arian murmured, almost to the child, "and I will make sure no harm comes to you." Leora's chest tightened at his words. They were not just a promise, they were a declaration, a bond forged in the crucible of fear and necessity. For centuries she had fled from the past, from the man who had once been her world, from the pain that had shaped her. And now, faced with the peril of the creature outside, she realized she could no longer run. Courage did not mean the absence of fear. It meant standing together, even when the outcome was uncertain. The creature pressed harder against the doors, claws scraping, and the elevator shuddered violently. Leora's eyes widened. The protective barrier Arian had formed seemed to strain, bending but not breaking. He moved closer, dark coat brushing the floor, shadows wrapping around him like a living armor. "Leora," he said, voice low and commanding, "hold him close. Do not let go, trust me, trust us." She nodded, pressing the child tightly to her chest. The warmth of his small body grounded her, and for the first time in centuries, she felt an unshakable resolve. The past, the fear, the betrayal, it all seemed to fall away in the presence of the moment, replaced by clarity and courage. The creature roared once more, and then the elevator shook violently. Sparks of energy flared along the edges of the barrier, and Arian's eyes glimmered with a brilliance that was almost blinding. With a sudden, controlled movement, he extended his hands, and the shadows surged outward, enveloping the creature. It hissed, recoiled, and struggled against the invisible prison. But the power emanating from Arian, combined with the purity of the child's life, held firm. Leora watched in awe as the predator's strength was absorbed and neutralized by the combined force of love, courage, and will. Slowly, impossibly, it withdrew, fading into the shadows from which it had come. The elevator trembled once more, then fell silent. The air seemed to lighten, the oppressive weight lifting, leaving only the faint hum of the machinery and the soft cooing of the child. Leora's knees weakened, and she sank against the wall, still holding the baby. Arian stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "It is done," he said softly, "for now." Leora looked up at him, eyes wide. "For now," she whispered. "The world is vast," he said, voice low and serious, "and danger always lurks, but we have survived this together." Her chest tightened not from fear but from emotion. "Together," she echoed, realizing that the word carried centuries of longing, regret, and hope. The child stirred again, reaching toward Arian instinctively. He bent down, allowing the tiny fingers to brush against his dark coat once more. Leora felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The moment was fragile, perfect, a fleeting connection that promised something greater. Arian's gaze softened as he looked at Leora. For a brief moment, the centuries of pain, betrayal, and distance melted away. The man she had once loved, the man who had been a king, a predator, and a protector, was still there beneath the armor of shadows. "You kept him safe," Arian said quietly, almost reverently. "Even when I was not here, even when the world seemed impossible." I had to," Leora replied softly. "I couldn't let anything happen to him, not after everything." He nodded, understanding more than words could express. "And you will not be alone anymore," he said. "Not you, not him. We face the future together." The elevator jolted slightly, then began its slow ascent once more. The storm outside had lessened, rain streaking the glass in gentle rivulets. The city below shimmered like a sea of stars, distant and eternal. Leora clutched the child, feeling the pulse of life and hope in her arms, and looked at Arian with a mixture of awe and relief. For the first time in centuries, she felt a sense of peace. The danger had passed, at least for now. The shadows that had haunted their lives seemed to recede, leaving only the quiet promise of tomorrow. The elevator doors opened at the top floor. The glow of the city stretched infinitely before them, and Arian lifted the child, holding him gently. Leora felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and strength. She realized that the past, with all its pain and longing, had led them to this moment, a fragile, precious equilibrium where love, trust, and courage intertwined. Arian looked down at Leora, a faint smile curving his lips. "We have survived," he said softly, "and in surviving we are stronger, together." She nodded, tears slipping freely now. "Together," she echoed, her voice steady, filled with the weight of truth and hope. The child cooed again, tiny hands reaching toward Arian, and the bond between them seemed to solidify, unspoken and eternal. Outside the skyscraper, the city hummed quietly, unaware of the extraordinary moment unfolding above. And yet, even as they stepped forward, leaving the elevator behind, Leora sensed that their journey was far from over. The world was vast, and danger, though delayed, was patient. But for the first time, she felt a powerful certainty. They would face it together. The night sky stretched above them, infinite and mysterious, a reflection of the path ahead. And within that vast expanse, the vampire king, the woman he had once loved, and the child who bound them stood ready, united, resilient, and transformed. The shadows of the city could not touch them now, not while trust, courage, and love illuminated their path.